Hello and welcome to a new reaction video. My name is Larissa and today I'm going to react to another Patreon request. This time I'm going to react to They Shall Not Grow Old, which is a documentary about World War I which came out in 2018. Before I start, I do want to tell you that if you also want to request your own movie or TV show episode or just a regular video, that is possible through my Patreon. You can check out the link to my Patreon in the description and you can see the options there. So yeah, like I said, this was also requested by a patron. If you've seen my Tucker and Dale versus Evil reaction, then you've probably heard that I talked about my patron who made a list and that I could choose from the list to react to something every month. Well, this was one thing from the list. The reason I chose it was like I filtered it from like highest rated to lowest rated, and then there were a few that were higher rated, but this one was also pretty high rated and I felt like it would be fun to react to a documentary for once. So that's what I'm going to do today. I know that there's also a lot of people on my channel who like my World War reactions, so yeah, I thought it would be nice to do one of them again. I'm gonna read the IMDb page real fast. It says a documentary about World War I with never before seen footage to commemorate the centennial of the end of the war. I hope I pronounced that last word right, centennial? But a bit of a better description I think would be, through groundbreaking computer restoration technology, filmmaker Peter Jackson's team creates a moving, real-to-life depiction of the World War I as never seen before in restored, vivid colorizing and retiming of the film frames, in order to honor those who fought and more accurately depict this historical moment in world history. Again, I hope I pronounce all of this right. But yeah, that does give me a bit of a better view what we're gonna see. And that sounds really interesting because of course from World War I there is a lot less footage than from World War II because cameras and technology, of course. So I think it's pretty interesting that they made something like this. So I'm very excited to check it out. So yeah, let's watch this documentary.
I gave every part of my youth to do a job, savage war.
Anybody who'd been out in 1914 and went home and then came back in 1917 wouldn't recognize it as the same war.
Terrible at times, but I wouldn't miss it.
I'd go through it all over again because I enjoyed the service life.
Never realised there was anything unusual about it. There was a job to be done, and you just got on and did it.
We were all, this was war, and we got to kill the Germans, and this is how we looked at the thing.
And it was rough, but we didn't complain.
You'd seen death so many times, you'd seen wounded so many times, blood didn't excite you. We were professionals.
It didn't affect me very much because I wasn't sufficiently up in the ways of the world. I was only a kid. It was more like a great big game to be enjoyed.
I don't think I should have ever been the man I am if it hadn't been for having to serve.
You'd learn to look after yourself. Your mother did all the chores. You've got to learn how to cook for yourself, darn your own socks, sew on your own buttons and all the things like that.
I had no regrets at all. You see, I had no wife, no girl, no nothing. No regrets and no horrors. If you survive that, you can survive anything.
Damn, okay. Pretty interesting.
That summer, there was a lot of talk about trouble going on in the Balkans, but we were a long way from the Balkans and it didn't worry us at all. We were starting the rugby football dinner with the German team. German here, and next to him was an Englishman, and next to him was a German, and so on and so on. A runner arrived into the middle of this dinner. Extraordinary news of outbreak of war.
War declared on Germany.
We didn't know what we ought to do. Seize a knife off the table and plunge it into the German or what.
Yeah, that must be weird.
After a little bit of discussion, we decided that as far as we were concerned, the war was going to start tomorrow. The party proceeded.
I mean, might as well have one last good party.
I thought that any enemy of England was an enemy of mine. I wanted to be in it.
I didn't believe in war to that extent, but I was prepared to do my part.
You see, in those days, men weren't to think for themselves, to do what they were told, and that's all there was to it.
Oh, my mother was very aggrieved about it. Young man, you decide you're going to go.
And there was a queue of about 1,000 people trying to enlist.
Everybody thought that it would be a...
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of expected from you then, I think, during that time.
My mother, she said, you wait until you're 19. It was the age in those days, 19 to 35, it was supposed to be.
I think it's always the moms who, yeah, they like it the least. Understandable.
My mother, she said to me, look, we could stop you doing this because of your age. Yes, I know you could, Mother, but I'm sure you won't, which they never did.
All the young fellows of that age were volunteering, and I thought it was my job to do the same. I was desperately keen. I said, direct enlistment, please.
Lots of the lads were joining the local regiments, lads that I knew and been to school with.
The thing is, I can never really imagine what it's like to make that choice and be like, okay, I'm going to war and I could die, you know? But when they explain it like this, it's like every young boy is doing it. So I think it's like, it's still hard, but it's kind of normal in your area, so everyone does it, so it's kind of logical you do it too. That does make sense.
Some of them were obviously chaps who hoped to live in some comfort and brought suitcases with clothes with them, which they never saw again.
We had to all get our hair cut, and you'd say short back and sides. But the answer was straight over the top with horse clippers, and we looked more like convicts themselves.
People who really carried us through was the old sweat that had previous war experience. Gave us a lot of wise.
Okay, that's nice.
Sallow, skinny, frightened children, the refuse of our industrial system in very poor condition and had to be made into soldiers.
Many of us had given our own ages to join the army.
And gave an order that every man...
This looks pretty creepy. It's kind of like AI, but not that advanced yet.
He said to me, how old are you? I said, 17, sir. Go outside and come back and say you're 18. Went outside and said we're 18. Went straight up the sea for 400.
I said, I'm 18 and 1 month. He said, you mean 19 and 1 month? Thought a moment. I said, yes, sir. He said, write a sign here, please.
I feel like if they would make this now, 7 years later, it would be even better.
I was 16 years old in 1970, 4'2" tall, and my father allowed me to go. I was 19 years old, 3 years older than what I really was.
I was 15 years, 2.5 years short of 18. Got before this medical officer, said, all right, you pass.
That is young though. I think 17 is already really young. I mean 19 as well, but then it's fine. Because they said it was like 19 to 35.
I walked into the barracks.
14!
Said I'm 18 and that was it.
My parents wrote to commanding officer and asked for me, as I was underage, to be ready. Your parents want you back. Do you want to go? I said no.
The chaplain...
That is a literal child.
One lad, they said, these boots don't fit me. And the quartermaster said, there isn't such a thing as boots that don't fit in the army. It's your feet that don't fit the boots.
We were all issued with these famous puttees. Personally, could never quite master the putting on of puttees.
The main reason for puttees were to support the legs in marching.
Kid with a kilt, nothing to wear underneath, man. Has not been issued with underpants. I was given strict instructions that I couldn't ride on top of a tram car. I had to ride downstairs.
Now, the pack was for everything that you owned. There was a needle, thread, spare buttons, knife, fork, spoon, razor, shaving brush, toothbrush, and also a half-pint mug. One spare shirt and one spare pair of socks. And that was your kit. The army razor with which we were issued was absolutely useless. Came in handy for cutting up meat and so forth. It was a crime to have dirty buttons. You were never issued with the materials to clean the buttons with. You had to buy them yourself.
Bit of a weird rule then, if you don't even give them that.
PT before breakfast.
Press-ups and physical exercises, arms upward stretch.
No, you're fresh from there.
They must have made millions of tins of P&A, plum and apple. Oh, 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 it's a lovely war. What do we want with eggs?
Oh, is that their team song from the Jam?
Military discipline was a shock, being chased around from pillar to post by disciplinarian NCOs.
Some of the sergeants were shockers. Out of step, or if you didn't keep time, or if you didn't handle your rifle properly. They were always having a go at you. One night I'd gone to bed, said, oh, you want to do a piss? So I did the business in the pot. They'd rested this big, huge pot, which contained gallons, on the door. This sergeant came along, this thing turned up, and he was drenched from top to bottom in fluid.
Ah, nice.
If you behaved yourself, you had nothing much to fear.
It was just a matter of doing what we were told.
I like to be told what I had to do, because there was a reason for doing it. Realise that was the best training you could have.
The first week our route march would be 10 miles. Second week it would be 12, so on and so on.
Yeah, I will never forget when I watched Band of Brothers the first time. Like, the first thing you see is in the first episode that they have this really intense training and all. And I was really like, I get that you need to train, but why does it always need to be so strict and so heavy? And then the show progressed and I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. And honestly, ever since I've been watching more war movies, I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Oh, those army boots. I could have cried. My
feet
and ankles.
So to get your boots made pliable, you used to urinate in them and leave it overnight.
Oh.
Men were clerks or they'd worked in shops. The very nature of their calling didn't make for fitness.
They used to march us all round the West End. Deluded ones fell for the con trick and lined up behind us, and we used to march them all down to Chelsea Barracks where they got signed up.
Nice.
That the chaps in the cookhouse, but anybody can make a stew, and that's what they did. In the afternoon, it could be a lecture on Vickers machine guns.
They used to strip the machine gun right down.
I honestly think this is so interesting. Like, they just keep talking, but it keeps being interesting. Everything they say, and I think the footage we're seeing, that really adds to it. With everything they tell, they have like good footage with it.
I'd never fired a rifle in my life. But on the first day, we went onto the rifle range. Just the next thing I was made, first-class rifleman.
We were told to make as much noise as we could. I think that was sort of frightening, and it didn't seem to me to be a likely thing to do, but we used to shout.
When you train as a division, 12 battalions, that's roughly 12,000 men, are on the move.
Damn.
Saturday morning, we were let off, but we had to do sometimes barrack duties. On Sundays, we were all marched down to church. Didn't matter what religion you were, you all had to go, and that was it.
The 1,000 men who joined up as a motley throng now became a transport man, a bandsman, signalmen and so on.
Although we hated the sight and sound of our disciplinary sergeants, it reflects greatly to their credit because they knocked us into shape as regards to marching and foot drills.
The officer said, well, you haven't had time to be made sergeant, so we'll give you a couple of stripes. So they made us corporals, and in less than no time, we were marched down to the station.
I wondered, shall I ever come back? I didn't think I would at the time.
40, they were all glad they were going. Nobody was crying.
We arrived at Folkestone in the evening.
There were talks by officers to us to behave ourselves on foreign soil.
Damn, so many people on this boat.
Biggest number of casualties were NCOs. We weren't all too keen about this. I went into the lavatory and my stripes came off and they disappeared through the porthole. Back on deck as a private.
If we passed a field of carrots, we used to raid the field and walk along munching the carrots and turnips.
You just marched and marched until roughly 20 miles from the trenches.
Damn.
We went through towns, villages that were absolutely derelict. So we never knew where we were, except that we were in Belgium.
We were relieving men of the 28th Division. As they passed us, we would say, "What's it like up there?" The reply invariably came back, "Bloody awful, mate."
Coming back, got their tails up all right. I didn't know what to expect, just hadn't a clue.
I just can't imagine that you're still so excited to get there. Well, you know that something awful is waiting for you.
Follow me.
Ooh.
You got the order load, magazine, and one up the spout.
Keep your head down, single file. Captain would then direct you right to the front trenches.
Pretty cool to see this with color.
Guide would always be sent out. The trenches in France were a maze. If you didn't have a guide, you could very soon get lost.
The trenches weren't in one straight line. They were built on what they call a traverse system.
There was a front line of trenches, and then there was a second line of trenches.
Support line would be about 50 yards or more behind the front line.
Our world was divided by no man's land, beyond which were bogeymen who would kill you if they ever saw you.
All you could see was hundreds of shell holes, your barbed wire, German barbed wire.
You could see dead bodies hanging on the barbed wire, and they may have been there for a long, long time.
Oh, that's brutal.
In places in the world. Never.
Yeah, that looks depressing.
You had to be extremely careful because a bullet would go through one layer of sandbags quite easily.
I was talking to a bloke one day, prop. His head was smashed in like an egg. It was that where a sniper could get an aim on him. We used to do
fucking dangerous.
A third of the people on sentry duty, third working and a third sleeping.
We just slept where we were.
No beds, just flopped down on the ground.
Their backs must have felt amazing.
We were able to dig out the side of the train. We used to still sleep on the 204 off stretch.
And then you'd have your
crazy
on the parapet and then rest again.
Yeah, honestly, I think you'd be so tired that you would really easily sleep.
It's a job to keep awake, and well betide you if you're caught to sleep.
You are so tired you could sleep standing up, which I've done many times.
That's what I mean.
The water came up in a 2-gallon petrol can.
And we could taste the petrol in because they couldn't wash it completely out.
Ugh.
We were scooping water out shell holes. It might have been dead bodies underneath. We thought as long as we boiled it for a long time, green stuff would come off the top. We'd made tea with it.
That's how I got my dose of dysentery.
There was no sanitary arrangements.
No, pretty hard when you're there.
7 or 8 chaps on the pole.
People used to go to the toilet with no privacy.
Yeah, they're just sitting there, taking a shit, just talking to each other.
You got quite used to it.
Didn't matter a damn because there's no women or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't think I can show this picture on YouTube.
You'd wipe it behind with your hand.
You never washed.
Horrific shout. The pole had snapped and the 4 men who were sitting on the bar fell down in the muck.
That's terrible.
Side of the wall.
I understand that it's very funny for the ones who weren't on that pole though.
Nobody wanted to go near them.
We had no spare clothes at all. You were living for weeks without washing or getting a bath.
Really badly infested, as we used to call it, with these lice.
Lice was a dreadful problem.
I don't want to see this close up,
6 legs,
please.
feed 10 times a day.
I will not watch, I refuse.
And you could hear the eggs going pop, 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 pop.
The sooner you got your shirt back again, the heat of the body hatched the eggs that you'd missed.
Biscuits which had been left by the troops 2 years previously and tasted the green mould in them, but it didn't do me any harm.
Anything's good, you know, when you're hungry.
You're always hungry.
Fair. When you're really hungry, yeah.
I can't remember anything more nerve-wracking than the continuous shelling without stop day and night.
I mean, you see people blown to little bits. I've actually had to put them on in a sandbag.
In a fifth of a second, your resolution would break, and you'd throw yourself down into the mud. The other ones laugh at you.
The shrapnel shell would burst in the air and spray bullets on the troops below, as if they're from a shotgun.
Damn.
The bullets came down whistling like all the hobs of hell.
That is pretty scary.
Germans were very active with mining. And I've got the men to open up rapid fire to prevent the Germans from getting into that crater where they could bomb us.
Front line gets damaged and it's got to be repaired. I shouted gallop like that.
And they dropped them all amongst the horses. Oh, a hang of a mess.
Oh.
They're laying down there with their intestines hanging out.
No.
Hanging out.
That boy, bloody German. To lose a horse is like losing a friend. Boy has 2 or 3 days rest. When a boy likes an animal like that, there's not a lot wrong with him.
Yeah, because if you know your horse well, it's kind of like losing a pet then.
Smell of decaying corpses.
You never forgot that smell.
It was the smell of death. If you've ever smelt a dead mouse, it was like that, but hundreds and hundreds of times worse.
Yeah, I feel like if you've never smelled that, you can't even imagine that. So me, I personally, I can't imagine it.
Bits of human bodies lying about. An everyday thing.
Wherever there was a grave or a body, there were rats.
Oh yeah, of course.
Big fat ones. Where they got the fat from.
Unpleasant animals because of the filtration into the graves.
They used to feed on the dead and come in the dugouts, pick up scraps in there.
Felt something warm on my face. And a little heart went bang, 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 bang. Devil scratched my face with the claws of his own feet.
Chase them, do anything.
Holy shit.
Then you've got gas.
Rolling slowly along the ground.
Take our mask out and stick it on.
Yes, there was phosgene gas later on. There was mustard gas, very effective. Also slightly gassed.
If you couldn't get your gas mask, you were to pee on your handkerchief and stuff this around your nose and mouth.
I think much of the urinating on the handkerchiefs, so I went into latrines and I stuck my head in the bucket. I'll tell you.
In the winter time, as the weather deteriorated, she's got more and more sodden with water.
Honestly, in the winter time, that just feels the worst.
Rising higher and higher until it reached our chests. Difficulty was frostbite.
Yeah.
Gumboots filled with water because they were frozen to our feet.
When you're talking about French feet, you're talking about going
crazy.
Hack the legs off.
Sank into the mud, the decomposed bodies of humans and mules, and that was the end of it.
The boy was in the middle of this huge sea of mud, struggling. We couldn't do a thing. No hope of getting to him. We look on the lad's face and he was only a mere boy. It's really pathetic.
Drunken Germans said, oh, I'm going to give them hell today. Open up with all these batteries and catch hundreds of people unaware. It was what they call holding the line.
Isolated us completely from civilization. So isolated, living in this mud.
You could sympathise with how a rabbit must feel. We were hunted by mankind, just the same as a rabbit.
Yeah.
You didn't care how the war was going, whether you were winning. You lived like tramps, didn't polish any buttons or any uniform bits that you liked, and nobody worried.
When the war was not very active, it was really rather fun to be in the front line.
It doesn't sound like a lot of fun, very honestly.
Then we would bomb and bayonet the Germans coming out on their hands and knees out the dugout. We'd smack them over the head and throw in a couple of bombs. One was to knife him, garrote him, or to bayonet him. Quietus was the...
All the dead bodies are just insane.
Threw the revolver at poor little Rudolph. He was only about 18, hit him in the face with it. He screamed and came back at me, and that's when I got him with a very pistol. I felt very sorry for him. He said, Dankeschön, das ist gut, and died.
It was a very successful little raid, and they got 2 prisoners, I think, which was all they all wanted.
The first Germans I saw on the Western Front.
A lot of the German troops, they were very good, very friendly. The snipers would fire, but not hit anybody. You know what I mean?
A sign, got mittens in German. God is with us. We put a sign up in English. We got mittens too. We don't know if the Germans enjoyed that joke or not.
There was a wounded.
They hated the Prussians.
Cruel bastards.
We were going for a supposed 1 week's rest.
Extricated ourselves from the mud, ironically called rest.
You didn't criticise people. If you had a chap who was a bit dicky, you would keep an eye on him, just like in a family.
A bit dicky.
The thing which always struck me as being absolutely stupid. The next morning, every man had to be spick and span, not a trace of mud on him.
Just like nothing happened.
In other words, smarten yourself up.
Kind of like getting back to civilization or something. I can't get over how creepy some of the faces look. Look at this guy with the flute, he's possessed.
We used to have to make our own amusements.
My mother sent me a parcel with a plum pudding of all things, no thought of being able to cook it. We used it as a rugby ball.
I won't say I was the only sober one. Most of them were, well, merry about it. I mean, you took part in everything. You had to fill your time in, you know. Smoke.
Even children there are just laughing about it all.
Guns used to be brought out by horses.
8 horses to each gun team, 4 horses to each wagon team, about 60 horses.
You got 5 francs. A franc was worth 10 pence, so 50 pence was your pay for a fortnight, 50 pence.
Town of any size at all had a brothel. That was where most of these boys learned a little more about life than they would ever have done in normal civil life.
I led a very sheltered life, and they were beautiful girls with just a piece of lace on. I've never seen anything like it before.
I said to one of these fellas, when he got a 6pence, well, he said, that's not good. He said, it's a shilling. It was my first experience in a brothel.
4 or 5 naked girls came running down the corridor. We turned tail and ran. It was an eye-opener to me. Great big woman with this little cane in round, and she belted my backside as if I was a little schoolboy. Petty sergeant this and petty sergeant the other.
People were gambling all day long. The Canadians and Australians used to gamble terrific amounts of money.
The beer was very thin indeed.
So yeah, that's just what they do in their free time. Go to brothels and gamble.
Generally, in good-sized villages, you could get woodbines and players, and they were far preferable to the issue cigarettes.
We used to barter some of our underclothing and get a loaf of bread with it.
We used to swap our British cigarettes for their French wine.
It could be just as tiring out of the line as in the line, and it was sometimes worse.
If you were
How?
You'd have to go on the working party.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty heavy, I guess.
Enormous bundles of sandbags, ready-made-up duckboards, and worst of all, barbed wire.
But always hard work.
All the chaps were very tired, but it made no difference.
Yeah, okay, fair. I get that that's very hard work. Yeah.
The light rail, we only went as far as the communication trench, and then we had to push the thing along by hand.
Looks pretty heavy.
Somebody came along and said, oh, this is it. We're going to be home by Christmas. Well, just go down the road and look in the field there, you'll see.
Covered with tarpaulin sheets. See nothing except a square outline.
Officer said these are supposed to be hush-hush.
Simple reply was tanks. It was one of the best kept secrets.
We were delighted because these wonderful machines were going to win the war. Soon everybody'd be home again.
We were taken out of the line and had intensive training.
It was to get used to plunging them into somebody's body.
Put on the rifle range.
Firing rifle grenades is a specialist job.
But they were clumsy. I didn't like them, man.
Well, I wonder how many accidents happened with that then.
We had to go back up the front, and we'd only been out of the line a couple of days.
We didn't have a lot of notice, but we knew it was going to be a big advance.
Is that a train on wheels?
Push forward. Forward positions filled up with ammunition.
Germans are now outnumbered and outgunned and will soon go to pieces if every man goes into the fight determined to get through whatever the local difficulties may be. Its first battle. Let every man remember that all England is watching him.
All through the night. It got so bad, your officers at the side pushing men back into line who were struggling out. Your legs just seemed to go automatically forward. The feeling that we were walking in our sleep.
We were filling up the trenches, packed in like sardines.
Our 2 assaulting companies were ignorant of what their conduct would be when they got into action. Thought it might be helpful if he could furnish each platoon with a football and allow them to kick it forward and follow it. Took their minds off it.
Yeah, then you kind of go at it in like a playful way, so makes it less loaded or something. I don't know.
There was to be no preliminary bombardment for days beforehand.
I ordered fire on...
The power of those things. Insane.
The bombardment started and the ground shook. Hundreds and hundreds of gun flashes. 4 hours we had to sit there and take everything he slung at. We waited for the signal to move off. Everybody was anxious to go, but we waited.
We got no sleep at all that night, owing to the noise of our artillery barrage, which was continuous the whole time.
The fellow next to you, he's your best friend. You perhaps didn't know him the day before. An hour to go, they were the longest and the shortest hours in life.
We had unlimited time for thinking. Found myself thinking much more deeply.
Oh, sounds like hell. Being stuck with your own thoughts.
I don't think there was any feeling of fear. It was just that, you know, we were doing a job and if it came, it came.
Yeah, they keep saying that though. I think that's interesting. It's just a job, but it's a pretty dangerous job.
Frightened of being killed. But I was terrified lest I should lose an arm or a leg.
Waiting for an hour for an attack is not a very pleasant thing. It chattered away, trying to keep the spirits up, you see.
Difficult to explain the reaction of a man when he is in a big bombardment. As soon as it was light, we were given a ration of rum, and the amount of it as much as you could drink.
Beautiful day the way it dawned after a rainy night.
5 minutes ago, I remember those lads standing there.
More frightened, sitting waiting to start. Very frightened then, very frightened indeed.
Yeah, I feel like this must be so stressful. If you have to wait for that an hour, it must be the most stressful hour ever, knowing what's coming.
It was in no man's land, and that gave the Germans 5 minutes to occupy the crater, which they did.
Sergeant Moore, he was standing behind the trench. He got a revolver in his hand and he said, anybody goes back, I'll shoot him.
They put a curtain of shells over you.
It's simply noise for hours.
As soon as you get over the top, fear has left you.
No shouting, no cheering. Everybody was deadly quiet.
Just as I stepped into no man's land, somebody was shot through the head and his skull was splintered.
Oh, imagine just seeing that next to you.
The sight I shall never forget.
I realized that the Germans had been retaining that far until they saw how far the attack was developing.
Oh.
And then all hell broke loose. And my God, it really opened up. Just swept us.
Oh, terrible. Oh, I just get chills. Just the way this is the first time the image just disappears and you hear that in the background. I think that's so much more powerful than actually... Ooh, this too.
Came at us like hailstones.
I realised that was a bullet.
Oh my God.
And I hadn't gone more than a few yards before I was shot in the thigh.
Another chap, he was hit in the leg, continued with great bounds, hopping on one leg.
When the bullets hit the tank, the metal flakes were whirling around like razor blades inside the tank.
A terrible pain in the left hand, as if somebody had caned, and I found a big hole in it.
A man was running across the front of me and he was shot through the body because the contents of his wallet were flung out forward of me.
I felt a terrific bang on my right arm.
Just didn't think that this German machine gunner would trouble to fire at me. Next thing I felt a shock of quite a number of bullets hitting the right side of my body.
A hair crossed my path.
See your mates going down right and left, face to face with a stark realisation that this is the end of it.
These bloody bullets got me in the leg and blew a great big hole at the back. It didn't hurt.
I feel like if you see that happening, like right in front of you, you're only still functioning on like pure adrenaline, right?
But they weren't hitting you and you just go on. They say your past comes up when you think you were going to die and got very much past at 19.
True.
And all I thought was, am I going to live?
Everybody was either killed or wounded.
So many dead lying about, it was hard to avoid.
The sergeant behind me said, go on, you mustn't take any notice of that, you keep going.
We were literally walking over the dead bodies of our coppers.
Shells bursting within a few yards of the tank seemed to lift it up in the air, and you felt a tremendous back pressure.
The noise of the battle is so terrific that you don't hear any individual shots even. You don't see anything but this wire. It seems to be acres and acres of it.
It was just black with rust. I don't think a rabbit could have got through it.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, how are they gonna get through that then?
There was a
terrific weird. That was the disappearance of my steel helmet. I never found it again.
Bit off the chicken meat backside, a piece in me hip, piece in me leg, then a piece right through me.
Fella to my left took the full blast of the shell, half his head blown away.
Oh.
Shrapnel was coming down overhead.
Your nose is filled with fumes and death. I was literally blown about 12 or 14 yards. All that I could hear was the cries and screams of the survivors. Sometimes in 2, sometimes in 3 parts. Legs, arms, all over strewn all over the place. And all my romantic ideals of war completely...
Yeah, I get that.
Knocked off his left arm, knocked off his left leg, his left arm hanging on his cheek, and he's calling out for Nanny. His eyes hanging on pulsing. So I shot him. I had to.
Yeah, I guess in that way it's a mercy.
His misery. It hurt me.
All officers killed and wounded, most of the NCOs.
Sergeant came down into the shell hole. He was dead. He got it through the neck. He had a lovely pair of field glasses round his neck, and I nabbed them because things were so scarce.
There was a German standing up on his parapet and flinging bombs, so I shot him.
The officer gave us orders, open immediate rapid fire.
Trying to pick the shot and something hit me between the eyes, like a sledgehammer. I dissolved into unconsciousness with millions of golden stars in the dark blue heavens.
Did you ever go, Bill? He didn't even fire a shot. Was killed immediately. Reed, it was a pal of yours.
I'm kind of even starting to think, like, how did people survive this? This just keeps going and going and going. Like, if there were so many bullets, are there, like, actually people who didn't get shot? Like, at all?
And we went like hell, straight into the Germans.
I dropped down on my knees and the sergeant fired over my shoulder and hit the German.
There was this German on the floor of the trench, and poor bugger was dead scared, wondering whether to stick him or shoot him. German jumped out away to my left, another one on the right, so I pinned this German down and then shot the German on the left, another one up the spout and shot the German who was running away on the right.
We probably killed the lot.
Some chap said, poor old Dick got it.
The pacing of this, Jesus. I don't even have time to think, I'm just like, what the fuck?
Jets of flame coming across the trench. We'd never heard of flamethrowers.
Burnt 23 of our chaps to death. I plonked one into his chest.
3 Germans came out with their hands up. Young chaps about our own age, 19 and 20.
We just waved them on. We didn't fire at them, obviously.
As the war progressed, it was inevitable that we developed the animal characteristic of killing.
Well, we've got some young infantry lads, you know, the 18-year-olds. The machine gunners were putting their hands up and make any difference. They were killed.
Everybody was screaming, laying down, moaning and groaning. Eventually, there was silence.
I found a German officer with his lung hanging out. He was still alive, wasn't conscious. You could, nearest I came to ever shooting a man point blank, but we had to go on.
His chest and down to his stomach, neatly cut aside. What a fantastic exhibition of anatomy.
Wow.
The real shooting was over in about 10 minutes.
About 100 of us coming out instead of 600 have gone over.
Give us some room. I've got these thigh boots on. The bullet had gone in sideways, all the way down the leg, in, out, the ankle bone.
And then you only feel that after like an hour. I guess that's the adrenaline.
Some were holding one another and some were walking on their own, wounded in the hand or arm. Some were hobbling along and some were looking quite cheerful as they'd been free of something.
Hello, Mum! The worst cases were those who were shot through the chest, or the difficulty of breathing.
Oh, the pain was terrific.
I was not in very good shape at all. I don't think I could go on much longer.
Everyone you see is wounded. Crazy ass battle.
The medics will be waiting for you.
To bury these only little kids who were 17 or 18 years of age.
A lot of those kids, that was their first action, and they never knew anymore.
There was a little German fellow. He was terrified. And I was very, very sorry for him, really. He was only about 16, and we had a chinwag, and I just took his pocket watch. It was a normal thing. We used to rob them, you see.
So sad, though.
Yeah, underfed, and they were in very poor shape.
I took about a dozen prisoners back with me. They were all unarmed, and I just had my old gun.
I sat next to a German man who'd been wounded in the arm. To my amazement, he started talking to me in English, and he said he'd been a waiter at the Savoy.
I don't think the average British soldier ever had any deep feelings regarding revenge against the German.
Yeah, it's really just the war.
As the war went on, I felt as much sympathy for them as I did for myself.
They're also just young boys who were sent there, you know.
They were decent sort of family people.
They didn't
seemed to bear any malice against us. They had to do what they were told, like us.
General agreement when we were talking to Germans how useless war was and why did it have to happen.
That's kind of always my thought.
This big fat German was lying in the street, you know. Stomach was all gassed up, intestines lying out on his belly. And somebody'd stuck a pipe in his mouth. They all told him to get up.
They knew they had lost the war.
We, as frontline soldiers, knew they were giving up.
That is how the war itself came to an end.
Got the impression that most of the German soldiers couldn't care less who won as long as the war finished.
Because that's what everybody was thinking about then. We'd had enough.
Yeah, just going home.
We're in the pictures.
There was a fella in the war called Rumer, see?
Dad.
And then we had to shine our boots and clean our buttons. We knew the war was over then.
Hostilities were ceased from 11 that morning.
Never heard it being quiet. Now it's dead silent. You were so dazed that you could stand up straight and not be shot.
It was eerie.
Yeah, it must be so weird after all of that.
But no celebration.
Staff officer shut his watch up and said, I wonder what we're all going to do next.
There was no demonstration of any kind.
It was one of the flattest moments of our lives. We just couldn't comprehend it.
We had that sort of feeling that we'd been kicked out of a job.
To some of us, it was practically the only life we'd known. What was one going to do next? That was very much the feeling of everyone.
We've all got no work to go to. I don't want to go back.
There was no cheering, no singing. We were drained of all emotion.
Didn't end with a whimper, but something very much like one.
Wow, okay. Yeah, that's a lot.
First thing we did was write all, say we were all right, making sure we got the date on the envelope right.
We entrained to Victoria, and there we broke up.
Dumped rifles, bayonets and everything. There were a lot of suits, hats, shoes.
I feel like that's so weird to just kind of leave this all behind, like it's done now. Just leave your rifles behind, your suits and all.
Mass unemployment.
It was the most difficult thing to realise you're of no commercial value.
It was a shame the way ex-servicemen were treated. They weren't wanted.
Oh.
Some places said no ex-servicemen need apply.
Why not?
One of my pals was killed. When I went home, the very first thing that I did was go to his mother. She would have friend wanted to visit me. My son had been killed and that I'd come back alive. She was very bitter.
I got into my old bed. It's the first bed I'd laid in since I joined the army.
Damn.
She found me fast asleep on the floor.
People never talked about the war. It was a thing that had no conversational value at all. Those people were absolutely disinterested.
When I got home, father and my mother didn't seem the least interested in what had happened.
Oh, that's weird. I always felt like people just didn't talk about it because it was like so much and people who weren't there wouldn't understand anyway.
On occasions when I did talk about it, my father would argue points of fact that he couldn't possibly have known about because he wasn't there.
We were a race apart from the civilians. You could speak to your comrades, they understood, but the civilians, it was just a waste of time.
Well-meaning people sympathized, reflected the fact that they didn't really understand at all.
They didn't understand that people that you'd known and played football with were just killed beside you.
I think that's why a lot of times they organize the sort of meetings where they all meet up later, because they like really understand each other because they went through it together and they can talk about it.
Couldn't convey the awful state of things where you live like animals and behave like animals. People didn't seem to realise what a terrible thing war was.
They hadn't any conception, how could they?
We're none of us heroes, you know. We didn't like this business of being killed at all.
How did we endure it? The answer must be partly the fear of being found afraid, belief in human beings, your colleague, and there's no letting him down.
I think war is horrible. Everything should be done to avoid war.
Agree.
History will decide in the end that it was not worthwhile.
No, sadly people have still not learned from that.
When I went back to work, I went down the stores and the bloke behind the counter was a bloke who I knew. He said, "Where have you been? On nights?"
Damn. Okay. Oh, that's pretty crazy. Then they just get back and it's kind of... Oh, so the filmmaker... His grandfather served there. Oh, that makes sense. That's why he wanted to make this, probably. Okay. Pretty cool. Okay, that was it. Wow. Honestly, not at all what I expected from this movie. I think mostly because I said this at the beginning too, like, oh, we're just gonna see footage because it's pretty impossible to now still interview people who fought in World War I. But then they ended up using these voices of them and they made all these moving images and just like with Technicolor and all. That was so well done. Also, I have to say it was a lot. There were like no breaks at all. It was just talking. I gotta say, that does keep it interesting because you have to keep your focus and you keep being drawn into the story. But damn, it was a lot to process in 1.5 hours. But what I really liked is that it started like the certain teams, you can really see them. And you go from one team to another like so well, you barely even notice it. It all starts with like the enlisting and the training and all. When they go to the front, then you kind of get this whole story about the hygiene at the front, which was pretty disgusting. But yeah, honestly, what else do you expect? Then you get a part of when they get back and it's kind of their rest day, but they still have to work a lot. Then you have like this really messed up battle, all the casualties and all, that's what they talk about. And then when the war is over and when they get home. So it's like all these parts were just discussed in a really, kind of clear way. I feel like they just covered most of it, like they covered what you need to know. Yeah, of course we kind of, like if you watch more war movies, you kind of know how that all goes. But to hear it from like with these actual voices, with these images to clear it all a bit up. So it was really interesting to see. You really got a better view what it was like for them. And I also think that the end was pretty interesting, that they talked about how they were treated when they got back, that people just don't even really care. Because to be honest, when I was watching this and they were talking about this big battle where everyone was shot, I was thinking like, whoa, and then when you get back and you're just sitting around the table for dinner with your parents again, and they're like, so how was it? What happened? You know, just like when parents ask like, how was school? I was just thinking like, how are you gonna tell this to your parents when you get back? How are you gonna be like, oh yeah, this happened and this happened? And that's also when I got the realization, because of course you hear that more often, like people just don't really talk about it when they get back. But I always assumed that that was because they don't feel like talking about it, because other people don't, like civilians don't understand it anywhere. If you weren't there, you wouldn't understand. But to hear that those people just didn't really want to talk about it, or just didn't care, or didn't really think too much on it, yeah, that was pretty wild to hear. And also that shops just wouldn't hire people who got back from the war. Like, why? Are they too traumatized? Or what's your reason? That sounds really weird to me. It's weird that happened, because you went through something so traumatic. You saw all your friends die. And then you survived this and you think you're going home and yeah, it's over now. And then you get treated like that. That must be, pretty fucked up. Also, the movie warned in the beginning that there would be some images that could be found disturbing. Yeah, I get what they mean now. I think the part where they were talking about the battle and it was just like them listing these casualties and how it happened. And then you saw... The thing is, the whole movie, they already showed these pictures or like these moving pictures. I gotta say, the AI faces, they sometimes looked a bit creepy. And I honestly believe if they would make something like this now, because AI, it got so much better, I feel like it would already look so much better than it did in 2018. But still, for that time, what they could do, still really good job. But what I really noticed with that is just... the entire movie, they had kind of shown us those kind of pictures of just them sitting there, looking in the camera, kind of smiling, just smoking a cigarette, stuff like that. And you're kind of like, okay, yeah, these are the people who are there. And then when they talk about the battle, they show these pictures again and they're zooming into like one of the faces. And it's just like you see his face and then you see a dead body with like really bad wounds and all, and that hit. It was just like, this boy that's just sitting there like a few weeks earlier, just like excited to go to war, you know, it's their job, and like they explained a few times, they were pretty excited to go. And then you see that this is how they ended up. That was so messed up. So yeah, I think that was very well done. Also, I think it was interesting that they kept saying like, yeah, we were just doing it and we weren't thinking too much of it because it was just a job. I don't know, I always feel like people who are at the front or something, that's just such another world than the regular world. It just feels like you're so far from civilization. You're just like somewhere else. There's different rules, there are different ways of living. People like me and other people who have never been to war, I feel like we can never even imagine what that's like. But yeah, when you're just killing people like that, and it's just like your job, I get that after a time you just stop thinking about it. And also the enlisting part, like I said, I always felt like, oh, having to enlist, that must feel, yeah, there must be like some pressure to it, and it must be pretty scary, like knowing where you're going and all, and what could happen. But it's also, like they explained, everyone was doing it, so that makes it kind of normal, like, oh, you're supposed to do this, like it's not a question of yes or no, you're just doing it when you're a young guy. So yeah, I guess that were just some of the things that stood out to me. Also the story about the hygiene, yeah. I hated it, but like I said, what can you expect? But that, I mean, that is one of the parts. I feel like I've never really seen that been discussed in a documentary or a movie before, at least not this detailed, I guess. Like I said, sometimes it was a bit much, so I think at some points I might have lost my focus a little bit, because it was just like so much to process, and then I was like, oh wait, they're already talking about the next subject. That is also why I didn't talk a lot through the movie, but I also feel like that's not really necessary. I mean, what do I have to add? I wasn't there. Just let these people talk, you know? Yeah, of course I commented on some things, but mostly just like when I'm shocked about something, you know? But I feel like with these kind of things, it's way better to just give like a bit of a bigger review like I'm doing now after than while they're talking about it all. And I also don't really feel like pausing it every 5 minutes because they say something. Yeah, I hope it was worth the reaction, because like I said, I couldn't talk that much, and I also didn't have a lot to say because I'm honestly just learning here. So yeah, I don't have a lot to add. But yeah, I hope it was still an enjoyable reaction, and yeah, I hope you liked it. So like I said before, if you would also want to request a movie for a reaction, that is possible through my Patreon. It can also be a video or a TV show episode. There's different tiers available. Also, my full reaction to this movie, the full 1.5 hour, is also available on my Patreon under the uncut reaction tier, so check it out if you're interested. Let me know what you thought of this documentary. I'm very curious to hear your guys' opinions, so yeah, let me know in the comments down below. And if you like my reaction to this, then please leave a like, subscribe, and then I really hope to see you back next time. Bye!